Good morning.
And okay, good morning. We're recording this meeting on this is the Council for Economic Advisors. It's November 14th. And we are going to go around and do roll call, and if the online participants will please introduce themselves as well. So Heidi Frail.
Here. Nice to see you, Celia. Thanks for coming. I'm chair of the committee.
Adam Block is here.
Yes.
Adam. Okay.
Present.
Gina.
Present.
Bob Henschel.
Here.
Dave Downing. Andrew is not present. Bill Mahoney.
Yeah.
Adam Meisner.
Here.
Berwin Patel emailed he was not going to be able to attend. Schwab Raza.
Present.
Jake Shapiro.
Present.
Matt Talkoff.
Here.
Chris Teachout.
Here.
Mike Wilcox.
Here.
Wow, great. Nice to have you all. We are first, do we have any minutes pending? No, we don't. Okay, we can go right on. We have, hold on, I want to be able to make sure to say your name correctly and your title. So by request, we've, from the committee, we are excited to welcome, Assistant Finance Director Cecilia Simchak. Did I say your last name correctly?
Yes, you did.
And she's going to give us an overview of how the town deals with finances and how we might be able to, how projects are funded and what can come out of this committee. And if we have all this wish list, how this might come to fruition down the line, given how the town budgets. Cecilia, I'm going to turn it over to you. Heidi, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think Celia has been fabulous and has worked so long and hard with Dave Davison, the Director of Finance, but with the Select Board to help us understand the finances. And I hope she'll be able to do the same for all of us on the committee, just make sure that we have sort of a baseline understanding of basic municipal finance. So thank you.
So let me just have this open. I'm also going to share what I'm passing around. There we go. Okay. So again, I'm Cecilia Simchak. I'm the Assistant Director of Finance. I've been in my current role for about 2 years, but I've been with the town for a decade now. So I'm pretty familiar with NETA. Feel free, I'll go through this pretty quickly. Feel free to stop me at any point if you have any questions. Like I said, it's kind of high level. Jake, I did get some of your questions. So I think I tried to merge some of the answers in here, and there's a couple that I'll just kind of talk to after the fact. So to start, kind of overall municipal finance, the biggest form of revenue for the town is the tax levy, property taxes, it has multiple names. So what is the levy? It's the property tax levy is the revenue that a community can raise through real and personal property taxes. So it just refers to those two categories of taxes, but it does refer to commercial, residential, personal property, industrial, any open space, anything that falls under those categories. So there's two different limits. One is the levy ceiling and one is the levy limit. And this is what Prop 2.5 comes in. So the levy ceiling is the restriction that basically the town cannot levy more than 2.5% of the total full and fair cash value of all taxable real and personal property. That has nothing to do with the previous levy limit. That's just if we have $1 million in property taxes, you can only raise 2.5% in your levy, regardless of how much you raised previously, regardless of how much the limit was last year. And then the levy limit is a restriction on the amount of property taxes that a community can levy every year. And this is the maximum amount that a community can raise. So we can never go above that unless we take there's always like a caveat or two. So that's where you get into the operating override or the debt override and stuff like that. But that's kind of like the really basic starting point. I'm sorry, I did not move my slide. I'll let that sit on the screen, for a second. And for those online, I can send this out to Amy so she can get it out to everyone. Yes.
So could you just quickly explain how in many cases, real estate taxes go well beyond 2.5% in any 1 year?
So it's typically not, it's not your individual property tax that's limited to 2.5%. It's the entire pot of money that the town raises in real estate that is limited to the 2.5%. And that is before new growth, which I get into in a second. That also can increase you above the 2.5%. And that's typically where our increases come from.
And the 2.5%, that's not a like percentage, or that's not like the property tax you're charged. That's the 2.5% is the growth rate of the total levy that can be paid
Yeah.
per year, right?
So if, let me see where it is on this slide. Perfect. The next one. Okay. So the levy ceiling is, so let's say the full and fair cash value, like I said, is $100 million, just a nice round number. So 2.5% is $2,500,000. That's the levy limit. That is, or the ceiling. That is where we are. That is how much you can grow by. That's how much you can raise. So it's based on the valuation of all property in town. That's what the 2.5% is based on.
So it's a
It's not-
valuation. So
yeah.
you can mess with the millage rate and come up with higher taxes.
Yeah.
Well, that answers my question. Got it.
And so then the levy limit is you take the previous year's levy limit and you increase it by 2.5%. And then that's when you add in the new growth, and that's your new total. And then you look at your levy ceiling and your levy limit, and whichever one is lower is how much you can raise. Typically the
Celia?
ceiling is much higher. And
Can I just ask
Yeah.
one question? I think I just heard someone say that you can mess with it, the valuation. And I just want to make sure that everyone understands that valuations are also done by a guidance. Like we don't have discretion over how we value property.
that is correct, yeah. The state has to approve our valuations every year. And even the most recent year, we did the 5-year recertification, which was a huge undertaking. The state does a much deeper dive every 5 years, but every year they do sign off on our values. So it's not something that we like necessarily have as much discretion over. It's a calculation, it's a formula, there's a whole process depending on residential, commercial, what type of residential. If you wanted to hear more about that, I would bring in my director of assessing because she is the expert, not me. But that is the case. And then when you're raising it, if your property value goes up and somebody else's go down, you're just sharing you're increasing and decreasing the share of the taxes that you are providing to the town, not necessarily. So that's why it sometimes goes up by a different percentage than the 2.5%. Because it's your share of the total amount that the town is collecting. So new growth. That is an increase to the levy limit by an amount based on the increased value of new development and other growth in the tax base that is not the result of revaluation. So you do your annual reval, you increase the levy limit by 2.5%. And then you get to add on new growth. So that includes properties that have increased in assessed value because of development of property changes. If you're pulling a massive building permit, those are typically new growth. If you're building a new property on an existing plot of land, like you did a tear down and you built a new house, that is new growth. Any exempt real property that returned to the tax roll and any new personal property is new growth. And then if you subdivide a parcel or convert to a condo, those are also considered new growth. So that is typically where the town gets some excess capacity because it's a change in what we are valuing from the prior year. And so if you have $1,000 in new growth and the prior tax rate was 10%, it's 10% of that is your new growth.
Is personal property, is that like excise tax on your car, or is that something different?
No, that's so excise tax is something different and it doesn't fall into the levy limit. It's considered like a local receipt. Personal property is if you're running a business, all of the items that you own over a certain value that are worthwhile. So a good example is, French press, a lot of their baking instruments. If you go into a data center, all of their equipment. If you have a lab space, all of their science equipment, their medical lab, a dentist, all of their kind of x-ray machines, stuff like that. So that's kind of like the start of it. And then I'm kind of mixing two topics here, but the Needham budget timeline and how the tax levy fits with the budget process. Because I will admit, even when I started, it took me a little while to get used to the order because it seems counterintuitive to what I feel how most people budget. So the start of the fiscal year is July 1st. We release our capital guidelines in August. And then in September, the town manager does their consultations with the select board and the finance committee. And then the town releases its operating budget guidelines to the department. So we start a new fiscal year and we're immediately planning for the next. And then in October, about mid-October, capital submissions are due, and the end of October, operating submissions are due. The month of November, the town manager spends meeting with each of their departments on the budget. And then around December, all the way through January, February, the finance committee begins budget consultations with the departments as well. At the end of January, the town manager submits her balanced budget to the finance committee. In February, warrant articles are due to the select board. And then at the end of February, the finance committee drafts their budget due to the town manager. In March, finance committee budget recommendations are due. So that's if you open the town meeting warrant and you see, they recommend this article. April is Needham's local elections. May is the annual and special town meetings. June is the end of the fiscal year, and then we start all over again. So we're really constantly in some type of budget season. And planning to know how much revenue we're receiving from not only all sources, but particularly our tax base is kind of part of this budget timeline we need to know in order to know how much we can fund. So there's three major revenue categories in the town of Needham. I'm going to focus on the general fund for our conversation today, but it's the general fund. That's the catch-all. That's everything that's not set aside for a specific purpose by the law. Enterprise funds are funds that are run more like a private business. They're self-sustaining. We have two in Needham, the sewer and water. So all the money we take in from billing for water only goes to water expenses, and the same with sewer. And then the Community Preservation Fund, which is the 2% surcharge on real estate property tax bills, and then the town receives a state match on those as well. And those are much more restricted funds. So these are all the funding resources that the town has for the general fund. The biggest one is property taxes. It is the tax levy. That is where a huge portion of our money comes from, but we also get state aid money, local receipts, which is the motor vehicle excise tax, any solid waste fees, any departmental fees, anything like that. Use of reserves and other funds. So that's like the debt exclusion offset, free cash, which is basically if we collect money in excess of what we estimated, or if we spend less money than what we appropriated. So it's that, because you're always kind of guessing. And that gets certified by the state every year, and that's available for reappropriation in the following year. And then adjustments, and then other is just we have a lot of stabilization funds in the town of Needham, which are very similar to a savings account. You kind of put the money aside, town meeting appropriates it, puts it into a special fund dedicated for a specific purpose. Stabilization fund is more like our rainy day fund if we ever ran into problems. The athletic facility improvement fund, capital equipment, capital facilities. It's put in there, and then we can draw out of it for those specific purposes. So town meeting has already indicated we only want to spend this $2 million on capital equipment in the future, and we just kind of save it there until we have something that fits that description. So the kind of order, the town estimates the following. So they estimate the levy, the state aid, local receipts, other available funds. So right now we're in the middle of this process. We are estimating for FY27, which begins on July 1st, 2026. We're estimating our anticipated revenue. And then the town is submitting to the state for free cash to be certified. That usually happens in the winter at some point. And so we're also working on the submission as we speak to kind of get that money in, because that is another portion of potential revenue that we have to spend for the budget. Once we have the estimated revenue and the free cash value, that's when we can determine what can be funded in the department's budget requests. Because we'll know what the pot of money that we have is that we're working with. Because the town we cannot submit a budget that is over the amount of estimated revenue for the upcoming fiscal year. So we're always operating in advance. We're always saying, okay, we think we're gonna bring in $200 million in FY 27, so we're gonna budget 199 million. It's always kind of that game. So this is basically, I just screenshotted from our budget book from last year because we don't have FY 27 numbers because we're currently in the process. But you can see a little bit of the history. And you can see the breakdown of just how much that tax levy actually contributes to the overall revenue of the town versus state aid, local receipts. Free cash is a lot. We do have some guidelines about what we can use free cash on, just as best practices, because it's not a stable number, because it's not always guaranteed. We do not use it for regular operating expenses, because then we could run into a year where there's no free cash and all of a sudden there's not money for operating. So you want to be able to support your operating budget with set revenue that's coming in.
I mean, that number strikes me as enormous.
Yeah.
The town is collecting $20 million in excess fees.
So it's not just collecting in excess. It's also if we budget $200 million and the town only spends 180, that's $20 million right there. So it is both. It is, and you always kind of over budget this slightly. Because it is very hard to spend if you have a $20 million budget to the penny.
Yeah.
So that does come back in. It's if we have, articles that come in under budget, it's a combination of stuff, and then it rolls over from year to year as well.
Is there like a health ratio or best practices for that free cash? Like where do you want it? Cause you look at the growth of that free cash, it's pretty significant.
Yeah, so we had a significant growth, and I will say there is a chunk of money that's kind of coming over. We do allocate some of it if the free cash comes in at a certain amount, and I do not remember the exact policy off the top of my head, but I can definitely send it around.
Yeah.
We dedicate some of it to like a debt stabilization or some sort of stabilization fund. So we are pulling money out of that into the savings account if it gets over a certain amount. So that way it's not just sitting there. We are actually saving it away. A lot of the free cash is used to support our capital projects. So that's where a lot of the money does go, like our vehicle replacements, our anything that we do a huge capital project in order to avoid taking out debt, it comes through free cash. So then this is kind of a combo, and you'll see all the sources that were actual and budgeted and estimated, and then what the budgets were. And so you see they come in. FY 25 was exactly the same. FY 26 was slightly under. So you'll see that they're always going to be slightly under. And I think a good example right here is the difference between the actual brought in 240 and expended is 226. So that's about $14 million in free cash right there. That was realized.
I had a question. Does the town have a program by which the hospital, St. Seb's, or other institutions make payment in lieu of property taxes? Is that recognized anywhere in these numbers?
Yeah, so we do have a couple of properties that do payment in lieu of taxes instead of the tax levy, and that is involved in the local receipts category. I then, because your question about new growth and kind of what the breakdown of new growth was, I pulled the last 5 years. We do have FY 26 numbers, which are certified by the state for new growth. So you'll see it really fluctuates. It's really highly dependent on what building activity is going on in the town. When, the children's hospital came in, there was a significant amount of new growth, or when they started building. When TripAdvisor came in, there was a significant amount of new growth. So things like that tend to really hype up those numbers. And then just all the everyday teardowns that you're seeing in the town, as those increase, that actually does add new growth. But as they decrease, our new growth also decreases. A lot of our new growth is in residential, actually, pretty consistently, as well as personal property. You'll see commercial kind of ebbs and flows. Everyone knows the Muzzy property being kind of on hold, that is an anticipated new growth whenever, whatever goes there, goes there.
And what are the units there? What are, those aren't dollars, are they?
Yeah, those are dollars that we could raise on the tax levy. So this year, we can raise an additional 4 million
Oh, in addition.
on top of it, yeah.
Do we, excuse me, do we rely on new growth I mean, it's a great thing, it sounds like with respect to income, but do we actually rely on a certain amount, or do we consider it gravy, or how do we look at new growth every year?
Budget against it.
Yeah, we budget against it because we do see it, but I wouldn't say that we're planning on budgeting for it until we have the numbers. We have the numbers of new growth way earlier than we have the rest of the estimated receipts. So they kind of come in and we can plot it in. We're usually in our forecasting doing significantly under that, because we know that this isn't necessarily gonna hold forever. But we can see kind of in the market what's happening. We can see historically what's happening. We're paying attention to building permits as they're being pulled, things that are going in front of the planning board for approval. You kind of see the trends about what's coming. We have been very lucky to have a lot of new growth in town. I will say a lot of other communities don't have this to rely on, and so they do have to go and find ways to increase their levy in other ways. I didn't really get into overrides in this, but we can bring a question to the town on the ballot to increase the tax levy by a certain amount, either through debt or through an operating override. And then we'd have to ask the town, like, are you willing to raise more than the taxes that we usually do in order to fund this? That's kind of what's on the table for the Pollard, because it's such an expensive thing. It would be a debt override.
So question on
Yeah.
on like the factoring how we think about growth. So we said that we can, without new growth, grow the total tax levy 2.5%.
Yeah.
Our budget looks like it's growing at least 3.2% from last year to this year, at least in these numbers.
Yeah.
Is there kind of a healthy, steady state, long-term growth rate we should be thinking about that the town needs to target to fund, at least ongoing operations? That, as an economic advisor committee, we can think
Yeah.
about what our target is over that 2.5% and what can factor into there.
So we typically assume that the annual operating budget's about 3 to 4% increase every year. So it is difficult, especially when, just everyday things are costing more. You're seeing the CPI increase way higher than that. And then we know that we can't increase our revenues much more. It's not really aligned. Where it comes in handy is all the other sources of revenue kind of increase at various rates, but also because we're only relying on the levy for our operating budget, the capital budget is much more fluctuating. It's not the same consistent increase every year. And so that's where we have a little bit more of that wiggle room.
Mhm.
Excuse me, Celia. Apologies, I was bumped out of the Zoom, so I may have missed. I just wanted to see if you had already discussed the tax shift.
I have not, no.
Okay, so I think especially when we talk about sort of targeting new growth, that's an important factor to think about. So maybe you could cover that, or if you're getting to it, that would be great.
Absolutely. So the tax shift is the difference between the residential tax rate and the commercial, industrial, personal property, but I'm just gonna say commercial because it's shorter, and the commercial tax rate. And that is the ability to shift some of the tax responsibility onto one entity or another. There are some communities that have one tax rate set for residential and commercial. In Needham, historically, at least since I've been here, we've done a shift where we've shifted a higher tax rate onto the commercial property to the residential property. And so that's kind of where that is. We go in front of the select board every fall, like late November, early December, when we're setting our tax rate in a public hearing. And we show some of the different options, what it would look like as one tax rate, what it looks like as the split tax rate. And then the select board makes, votes on what is the recommended policy. And how much to shift it over. Like I said, we have historically shifted it. It's not a requirement, but it does require the select board to approve it. It does try to smooth out some of the increases. I know that last year was a significant increase across the board for basically everyone. We are not anticipating nearly as high increases this year. So in the valuation, we were kind of playing catch up and we're hoping that that smooths out moving forward.
Excuse me, sorry, a little confused. So there's different rates for commercial versus residential. Are you saying that that can change each year? It could be the same sometimes, it could
Yeah.
be different, it could be more on residential, more on commercial, vice versa. Every year that can change?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, the tax rate's voted on every year and so the split between the two can change. The tax rate can obviously go up or down
Mhm.
depending on how much room we have in the limit.
Excuse me, can I just,
Commercial
yeah.
always higher than personal.
yeah, I just want to jump in there and just say that, well, it is theoretically possible that the tax shift could change every year. In practice, it's been at a 1.7 or 1.75 shift for the past 21 years. So shifting that formula would be a huge impact, and it's not something that we do every year. I mean, we prefer to keep it the same. There could be discussions about what is the best way to do it, especially in light of a potential tax override. But it is not something that we, in practice, shift every year, or even theoretically would want to do every year, because that would be really disruptive, I think, to everybody's planning and ability to plan.
Thank you.
Hey, can I ask one more question about this light? So I understand the numbers. Take residential, for instance, that's fiscal 25, $1.983 million of new valuation,
It's
the new
new
revenue.
revenue off of the valuation,
Okay, 'cause
so.
that's one house and like obviously.
Yeah, no, it's basically the new growth is if you take the valuation of the new property and you apply last year's tax rate to it, that's the new growth.
All right.
Yeah.
That's the revenue, okay.
And so based on this, I mean, again, going back to that, we need to target a 3 to 4% growth rate for the town for the budget. We can only, organically grow the tax levy 2.5%. That means that this amount has to make up, this amount as in like the new growth has to make up between, 0.5% and 1% per year.
Ideally, yes.
And so do we forecast that out to understand kind of, are we on a healthy track to get there? Like, do we know how many potential lots could be developed and where we stand? Like, just so we can understand where we are from a health perspective.
Yeah, we pay attention to that. It is a difficult forecast because especially right now with things changing, properties falling through, like all of that, but we are keeping an eye on any potential developments, kind of when they'll come out and actually be a source of new growth, because as they're building, it's a little bit more difficult. So we are paying attention to that. We are kind of forecasting that out. And we try as much as we can not to rely too heavily on these values because they are significantly higher than we, I guess, I don't want to say expect to see, but we are lucky.
Got it. All right.
Yeah.
So if we don't have this level of new growth, then we either have to make some cuts somewhere else or find another funding source.
Well, is that?
Or not spend as much.
Potentially as well?
We try not to use free cash for operating because it's not a consistent, reliable source. I mean, it has been for us, but you always want to plan for worst case scenario.
And as
And-
far as like, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just want to stress that while the idea of targeting growth and tracking growth is a great one, it's not always possible in a municipal setting. And often if we don't bring in the new growth that we anticipate or we would like to see, we in fact have to reduce our spending. That's the alternative.
I was just curious, like the valuations themselves, when does the town decide? Well, like, when does the clock start on the new development? When the tear down is done, the new home is built, it's clearly worth more, taxes for that property are gonna go up. But when does the clock start ticking for the owner? Is it when the occupancy permit is issued, or is it when it's sold to an end user? Like, how
So
does,
when it's sold, that is when the property taxes shift to the new owner.
Yeah.
When it's new growth, it depends on, so we're always certifying valuations from January 1 of the prior year.
okay,
So there is a little bit of delay from when a building goes up from when that new growth is realized, just because we have to certify what the property was on a specific date.
and then you mentioned on the personal property, commercial personal property, right? You use French press as an example,
Yeah.
and ovens. do they self-report that? Is there an audit process? Does somebody from the town like walk into every business and say, okay, what do you have for equipment?
All of the above.
Oh, so, okay.
Yeah, so we do send out, like surveys, and then we do site visits as a town, either town staff or consultants go out and try to see some of the, equipment, you know,
Okay.
we're at the mercy of the property owner.
And that must all depreciate.
Yes.
So this year was a visit from outside consultants.
Oh,
But yeah. I would say in last 10 years, I haven't seen anyone, but this year was.
This year somebody did. Okay. Thank you.
So the person, that's the excise tax thing, you self-reported in February, and everything. That's gone up almost as much as the residential? Crazy, that just.
It's depending on what's coming in, as you know, hospitals come in, as lab spaces come in, stuff like that, as hotels, TripAdvisor, again, big companies like that, they tend to bring in more personal property than a small mom and pop. A lot of people working from home, if you register your business at your home, that also now becomes, you know, personal property. It's not a ton of money, but
Interesting, it's the same roughly.
What's the split between commercial and residential? Like the percentage of taxes coming in? I mean, I'm sure we're heavy residential, so,
I don't know off the top of my head, but I can get back to you.
yeah, I'm wondering if it's
Yeah.
like 80-90%.
The split between commercial and residential is 1.75.
what are you talking about, real dollars?
Yeah,
Oh, real dollars, I can't tell you.
I had the audio.
And so to Chris's question, I live across a street that a 2-bedroom ranch was taken
Mhm.
down, sold for $1 million. And then a new house was put up for 2.7. So does that new owner pay the whole, is the new growth on everything that the former occupant paid in taxes?
Yeah, so
What do they
it's
offer?
now, yeah.
Not when it was sold to the builder at $1 million, where he did because that probably was purchased for $200.
It's, the new growth is the last tax bill that the previous owner received.
Okay.
Yeah, so whatever they were paying on whatever their property was valued
And then
at.
if the builder owned it in that interim, he had to pay the difference.
He pays the taxes on
Okay,
it.
until it's the new
Which is the
one.
motivation of the builder to get rid of it. It's one of the bills I don't want.
Did not sit long, okay.
One last quick question, remind me, how does it work with, so for example, the Muzzy property?
Mhm.
Do they pay anything now while it's vacant, or do they pay less, and then?
Yeah.
How does that?
As long as the property's there, they're paying, the property owner is paying property taxes on whatever the value of the existing property is.
Of
Purchase
the land?
price.
The land.
Yeah,
So
the
whatever that-
land of whatever the, if there is any building on it, anything, it's that. If it's just the land, then it's just the land.
So whatever they paid for that land a few years ago, that's what the tax that they're paying now is valued on.
It's whatever the current value of the
Assessed
land.
The assessed value of the land.
Yeah.
I think it's less
What it-
than what it was.
What it
purchased
paid,
for,
what they
right?
paid for, it could be more, it could be less, it just depends on what it's currently assessed at this year. So every
But-
property gets reassessed every year.
But once developed, they'll also be paying.
All the buildings are gone. They cleared it all, so there's nothing there except the raw land itself.
Okay.
So in theory, they should be paying less than based on the original price.
Okay.
Right, but once it's developed, they'll be also paying the personal property, which is significantly more.
Right, so at the risk of stating the obvious, we want these vacant things to
Mhm.
get built. It's
Yeah.
crazy, yeah.
Mhm.
Great, thank you.
And then the last slide that I threw on was just what we as a town, or second class, what we as a town, kind of put out as our budgeting best practices. And this is where the free cash rule was the use of free cash to fund operations will be minimized by limiting such use to no more than 2% of the prior year's appropriated operating budget or the actual turn back, whichever is lower. So we do try to keep in mind, not just funding the current budget, but funding for budgets in the future. Because if we spend all of our money now, it doesn't help us in 3 years. So we are constantly thinking about ways to set money aside in a stabilization fund to really put forth more sustainable budgets currently, and especially as we see what's going on in in the economy moving forward. And then I just added a couple of additional resources if anybody was interested where I got most of my information. It's all out there. The levy limits of primer on Prop 2.5 really goes into the details of what can be considered new growth, how to calculate all of these amounts, how to do any sort of debt overrides and operating overrides. And then our budget book has a lot of our revenue summaries. We detail out how we forecast, exactly what we're expecting to receive, and then the policies, glossary and guidelines. And the most up-to-date one for FY27 will be posted early next year, and that'll have all of the newer information.
So I know we didn't cover completely, but you mentioned the topic of overrides.
Yeah.
And I know that that's something you kind of go above and beyond the 2.5%. This council, we think about kind of local businesses as well and how they're going to be impacted. I know in the current, one of the current memos around Pollard, we said that I think individual single family homes, like average value of 1.4 million, will be impacted up to like $2,000 per year at peak.
Yeah.
Do we know, or do we have a forecast of how the businesses or commercial properties will be impacted given the tax shift? Just so we can understand kind of how they might be impacted individually, so we can also think about that in terms of our planning.
Yeah, we don't at this moment. We're waiting on updated construction estimates for the Pollard and timelines, and that kind of all plays into it. So any number we would give you would be kind of not the most accurate number, not the most, good faith forecast. So we are working on recalculating a lot of that stuff at the moment, and hopefully we'll have some sort of idea for you in the near future.
How much is, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, the memo I saw was from, I think, like April this year, so I know that just based on like current valuations, if we can see
Yeah.
like the commercial side of that, because I think it's just, again, helpful for planning, but.
Yeah,
we can wait.
my director of finance, deputy town manager Dave Davison is working on a lot of that right now. And so I brought up this question to him and just said, this is something we should be looking for.
Yeah, thanks.
I was gonna ask, how much debt does a town currently have, and is there a debt ceiling? So how much we can borrow? I mean, is there a limit that?
Yeah, so we try to keep it, debt under 3% and then all
Percent of
excluded debt
valuation?
of all of our budget or revenue. And then 10% for excluded debt. We've gone above and beyond that very rarely for the 3%, or the 10%, excuse me. But I can pull out the numbers. It's on a report online for debt. And I can show you kind of where we're at current, or the last time it was updated, which was earlier this year.
And is there a limit that we can't surpass?
We have our own best practices, but legally, I mean, it's just being fiscally responsible. I'd say they don't think it's legal in that necessarily.
Any other questions for Cecilia?
Does the state issue a credit rating for Needham?
The independent agencies do, so Standard & Poor's and Moody's. We have a AAA bond rating, which is the equivalent of a credit rating, but that is where we are. We just got it recertified, so we're keeping it there. We've been a AAA bond rated community for a long time now, since before I got here.
And then
I don't know if
I
Heidi,
just
you
say
know
that
how long exactly.
a long time. I mean,
Yeah.
basically as long as Dave has been here, but I will say that AAA bond rating does include the forecasted Pollard project. So the bond agencies are aware, not only that we have this on our forecast, but that we are planning to do a ballot override in order to fund that project. So even that information is incorporated into the current AAA bond rating.
Yeah. And part of what the bond rate agencies look for, in addition to when we're looking to undertake a massive project such as the Pollard, is that our regular maintenance and operating expenses, not just operating budget, but capital maintenance, is still included in that forecast. That we're not dropping off important things in order to fund.
So are there any preliminary guesses on Pollard as far as how much it's gonna cost?
I think it's been
400 million?
You know what? We're going to be having a lot of that information come out this week or next week. It'd be best if we didn't start speculating and throwing around numbers that are misused.
I was just curious. Thank you.
I think there's a
Sorry.
big community
Trying to
meeting
be prudent.
tomorrow.
Monday.
Monday.
The 17th. Oh, I thought there was something
Oh, there's a
tomorrow, the
walkthrough.
15th.
There is a tour.
What? Okay. I read your newsletter.
Cecilia, one more question. And In terms of all those sources of revenue, we talked about property taxes a lot. Are there any opportunities for revenue from the town when we benchmark ourselves versus other towns? And one example is like when you look at, the local receipts for parking that Needham collects versus like neighboring towns, we under index, at least some of the measures that I've seen. Are there other opportunities for us to think about that the town could drive some additional revenue that could help our budget? From any of the other budget lines?
Local.
Yeah, I mean, there's always the opportunity to raise local receipts. It's more just what does the town want to charge for necessarily? And how much of an impact is that actually gonna make versus, if we increased our parking, is that really gonna make that much of a dent in our revenue needs versus the frustration that people might feel paying twice as much for parking? So it's really always that game that we have to play.
I would, can I just add to that, Celia? That when we talk about increasing revenue to the town, that revenue, whether it's property tax or an excise tax or a parking meter, it is always essentially a tax. The only kind of revenue that is not a tax to the town is new growth. So things like increased residential development and increased commercial development. Those are the things that are going to both have the most bang for the buck, but also don't constitute a tax on existing residents.
Great, okay. Cecilia, thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was really helpful, and I'm so glad we had so many people in attendance to hear that. That was
Yeah, and if
really
you
helpful.
guys think of any other questions or any additional information you would like, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to either come back or send along some follow-ups. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. You're welcome to stay or leave, whatever you feel your time is worth. Okay, so we are going to do an update on the economic development manager position.
No,
Heidi, speak to that.
Well, Amy probably knows more than I do, but I would just say that I actually, we have posted the position. We have begun interviews. We are changing slightly the description of the position and reposting it with an eye towards increasing our candidate pool. So the process is definitely ongoing, but we're not quite there yet. But I really wanted to let you all know that it's in the works, and we hope to have this finished in like the first quarter of the year. So,
Quick
good news.
question, Heidi. Any particular reason why are you saying that the definition of the role changed since it was originally posted? And just curious why?
No, I
just
think,
based on what we're seeing?
the title of the position has changed slightly. We have changed the title from manager to director in order to target a more high level candidate pool.
Yeah, got it.
But
Thanks.
the actual duties are largely the same.
And then we wanted to talk a little bit about this committee and the future leadership of this. The intent is not to have the same chair in perpetuity. So Heidi, do you want to speak to that and what our plan might be and the interest? And we do have a really new fresh crop of faces. So we're also talking about timing for this.
Yeah, so one of the things that I'd really like to see is to have the economic development manager join the team, get settled in. But generally speaking, I think it's really healthy for committees in general to have a rotating leadership, to have several sort of leadership positions that people rotate into. It doesn't have to be a strict rotation, but it can be based on interest and desire. But I think it's really healthy for committees not to have the same leadership every year. And so I guess my hope would be to get the economic development manager settled into this position maybe before we change leadership. But I would love for everyone to start thinking about what you can contribute to this committee, where you might see yourself, in a month or in 6 months or a year, to help lead this committee and share your priorities with the group. So we're looking for a chair, potentially a vice chair, although depending on whether our new chair is someone who's been on the committee for a little while or someone who's brand new, I think that'll influence also, because I think it's it's good to have someone who's had a little bit of experience, especially with the town committee. But I'd like to think about establishing not only a chair and a vice chair, but potentially someone who might head permanently or coordinate our doing business in Needham campaign, because I see that as sort of an ongoing project. And so if you could all just think about how you could contribute to that, that would be great. We don't need any answers now, but this will be a topic of conversation into the future.
Any questions about that in terms of the committee and?
So we'll be looking for volunteers.
Yes. And just being a co-chair doesn't mean that you're elevated to chair automatically.
Yes.
So keep that in mind.
So you think?
So I would be happy to continue on in some type of role in supporting, but we would love to hear from other people about how they want to be engaged. And I am going to continue to do the Why Needham piece. If you want to help me with that, that was such a great meeting last time. We are waiting for the new economic position to be filled so we could work with them on that. But Amy's already said that she'd make some tweaks. So if somebody's willing to work with me, we can kind of work on some things to get in place, not wait till the hire. So I do agree that's such an important part. We've already looked at other articles about how other people do it. So that's a little bit on that. Amy has an update from Planning and Community Development.
Yes, I spoke to Lee Newman, the Director of Planning and Community Development. She was not able to join us this morning. There's a lot going on with that department. And so we had a conversation and she updated me on some major initiatives, which I will share with all of you. The last time she shared these with us was in June. So I'm just going to follow up on those particular projects and mention anything new. So the Muzzy Ford site, the town has not heard back from the developer on that, so there's no updates on that. 629 Highland Avenue, which was the plans to replace 5 existing buildings with 50,000 square foot medical office. There's no update on that as well. Boston Children's Hospital, the occupancy permit has been signed off from the town of Needham. New signage has been installed. In fact, I was driving to the Chambers event last Friday morning and I saw them installing the signage, which was very exciting. And they have signs in the windows that you can see from the highway or from the Apple Park showing that they are scheduled to open in January of 2026.
And Amy, is there interest for this committee to tour that property or have that person come in and chat? Because I deal with the government relations person and.
I'd love to tour.
I'd love to see it.
Yeah.
I'd love to see it.
Okay, I'll work. I think the town has certain requirements when the committee goes.
Yeah, it would have to be a posted meeting, but I'm sure we can figure that out.
What's that?
Okay.
Great.
Great. Okay, we'll figure that out in our recap.
100 West at Avery Square, the public hearing was held on September 16th. 189 units were proposed. Lee is in the middle of writing the decision and the planning board will vote on this very shortly. Okay.
How many units did you say?
I'm sorry?
For West Street, how many units did you say?
189.
189.
That's the Carter. That's the Carter's. building.
Rentals.
Yes.
Carter's
Correct.
building?
Yes.
Thank you.
The comprehensive parking study, the town is working with Stantec on this study, which is great news because Stantec was the firm that did the parking study for both Needham Center and Needham Heights in late 2023, early 24. So they're continuing their work on that. They, the expanding study will look at land use and parking requirements across all zoning districts in town, review best practices to see if any changes need to be made. So that's moving forward.
And I think Heidi, I did not give your update last time. We ran out of time. Did you want to say you had something about town parking? Possibly spot available.
I don't remember.
There's some off-site parking that might be available that retail, that businesses can purchase on behalf of their employees.
So yeah, you know, when I was working with Miles, who is now out, to streamline kind of how the permit parking program works. And I think we have more work to do there yet, but I do have a different update that I'd love to give if we still have the time. I am a member of the Large House Review Committee, and that committee is holding a public forum on Tuesday, November 18th. And the reason, well, obviously this is going to be an impactful bylaw. This is something, the intent of this committee is to review and potentially regulate the size of our larger houses. So there's been a lot of discussion in town that houses are just getting too big for their lots. And so this is providing a new scale for the size of houses. In the context of our conversation about taxes and new growth, we know that a reduction in the size of the house will have an impact, a small impact, I think, but an impact nonetheless on the amount of new growth on individual lots. So a tear down is replaced by a new house, and if that house is not allowed any longer to be 6,500 square feet, it can only be 4,500 square feet, then that loss of square footage is also loss of taxable new growth. And so the forum on the 18th is not only going to showcase the various reductions that have been hypothesized by the committee, but also the fiscal impact, which has been studied by a consultant and which will be presented to the public for the first time in that forum. So it might be of interest to this committee to take a look and see what the potential impact to new growth revenue could be. I don't at first blush, I don't think it's going to be too impactful. And it also appears that the impact of this reduction, which has been tried in other communities, is a short-term impact. Essentially, the housing prices ultimately remain the same, even when the size of the house is reduced. That's what has been seen in other communities like Wellesley. So, but it might be of interest. So come on, it's going to be at Powers Hall at 7 p.m. on Tuesday.
Heidi, does that include attached single family too? Like the large house review? Because a lot of these developers, they rip down the house, they put up 2 units kind of back to back as like read as one house, but they have 2.
So yeah, so the bylaw applies only to SRB, the residential district that is SRB, which generally doesn't allow for 2 families. There are some that are, sort of grandfathered in. Like if there is for some reason, a 2-family that's in the district, if you tear it down, you can rebuild it. And honestly, I can't speak to how these regulations would apply to those, but those are kind of like weird non-conformances. So not the rule. Those are the exception.
Thanks.
Sure.
Did you have another?
Yeah, I have a couple more. The Stephen Palmer Building, the town has hired Barrett Associates and Gamble Associates to lead the effort on the reuse study. They're working on reporting for a report on the existing conditions, meaning is it suitable for renovation or not, and what the process may be for the town to sell or lease the land. Again, not that decision is being made, but it's just looking at all different options, owning it versus leasing it.
And Amy, I thought that was an interesting process. They had to go out, they had to go in front of the town to get the money to pay. That was an unexpected expense and they had to transfer funds. So that was really town government, I think, at work watching that happen.
I mean, but that whole thing kind of struck me as a little backwards, right? Like the town doesn't even know what they want to do with the building and yet we're telling the residents they gotta go. Like, why couldn't we have kept them in place for a couple more years?
Well, that was discussed in length at that meeting.
Yeah, they don't wanna be land. Town doesn't wanna be land. That's the whole.
Yeah.
you
The
know.
worst thing you do is a landlord doesn't write a check to get rid of a tenant, so you don't wanna do that either.
Yeah,
the
that's a
most
long
painful thing you
discussion,
ever
but
do.
happy to help inform you later if you want.
Okay, so the Stephen Palmer Reuse Committee met in October and they'll meet again in a couple of weeks. And then on accessory dwelling units, the planning board is looking at that. They were originally intending to come to this October special meeting, town meeting, but that's actually targeted for next spring. And then Heidi already discussed the large house study committee. And I think that's it. Oh, and one actually exciting announcement, if you hadn't heard already, that a new full-service restaurant called Taberna is serving, which would serve Mediterranean cuisine, 110 seats, is being proposed for the former rice barn space at 1037 Great Plain Avenue. It's proposed by the owners of the James, and a public hearing was held last night. So hadn't heard any more on that since it just happened last night, but it's exciting. And then the ZBA, sorry, go ahead.
How did it go?
I don't know. It just happened last night, so I
Okay.
don't know. I can find out for you.
That would be a good business to follow along with in terms of how they go through their process of just, going through the committees and how long it takes. We've been talking a lot about doing that in Needham and how long it takes this to get established and just understanding kind of our hiccups along the way.
Yeah, for sure.
But the James and they've been in town, so, but still.
Sure,
it's
they're not new,
interesting.
but maybe that's, if they run into problems, then there's a problem.
Okay, good point.
And then the Charles River Center is going in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals next week for 86 rental units that would be available for people between 30 and 80% of area median income. And that's a 40B. And that's all I have.
Can I pop in one more?
Yes.
There's another public hearing happening next week. It's on Wednesday, the 19th. This is the day after the Large House Review Committee in the same place, same time. And that is for the Tree Preservation Planning Committee. And that is to establish a bylaw to help reduce tree reductions in light of tear downs. It's very specifically targeted at the clear cutting that happens with a tear down and rebuild, establishing a sort of an area in the yard where trees would need to be saved or mitigated. So you could still cut them down, but you would have to pay for them. And that hearing will be happening on Wednesday, the 19th. And that as well, while we don't expect that bylaw to have an impact on property value, it is likely that some folks at least will feel that that is an infringement on property rights. And so this is, another one of those kind of bylaws, a lot like stormwater, that influences what you can do with your property and theoretically could have an impact on property value. Although, to be truthful, the inclusion of trees in a property tends to raise property value.
That's all I have.
Great. And really, all of those meetings were in the News You Need Ham that came out from Amy. So please, if you haven't subscribed to that town newsletter, everything Heidi just to attend is listed. It's all news for residents to try to get the word out about everything that's going on. That brings us to 8:59. Does anybody else have anything? I do see that Andrew has joined the meeting. Do I have to do something to say that?
Yeah, I'm just gonna do the roll call.
Okay, we roll call. All right, so any other comments? Roll call to end. Let me go back to the
Thanks for chairing these.
oh, no problem. All right, Heidi Frail.
Do we need
a
we need a motion to adjourn.
to adjourn, second, somebody?
Second.
Okay. All right, so roll call. Heidi,
Yes.
Lise, Adam, I think exited the meeting. Dina? Yes.
I vaguely remember you being.
David Downing? Bob Henschel?
Yes.
Andrew online?
Yes.
Okay, Bill?
Yeah.
Adam Meisner?
Yep.
Schwab?
Yes.
Jake?
Right.
Chris?
Yes.
And Mike Wilcox.
Yes.
We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
So not only did I see the sign